I'm Letisia Cruz, and I am a poet. I'm also an illustrator. I do pen and ink illustrations. When I was in school, I did both poetry and I drew, and I was really inspired by photography as well. So I started out drawing a lot of the images in my poetry, and then that's a trend that has kind of continued throughout my life. Honestly, I'm mostly just inspired by my environment. I'm largely inspired by nature, inspired by the landscape of Florida. So I'm often coming up with ideas for poems just from walks, from, going out on a trail, from spending a day among trees, just inspired by nature. So I think a lot of my poetry just comes from the landscape. As far as if my illustrations are always inspired by poetry, I would say not always. Sometimes they are, and especially if I'm doing like a collaborative project where I'm writing poetry and illustrating, like Bigwig's Illustrated Guide to Birds, which is my most recent book, is that way, where it's a long narrative illustrated poem. But sometimes my illustrations are not inspired by poetry and they're just kind of standalone pieces. So I love working with pen. I tried different things. When I was younger, I tried different mediums, and I always kind of came back to the pen. I find it just really, it's such a free form. It just kind of flows, and I don't really start with a sketch. I kind of just go for it and see what comes. I think of illustration a lot of times like tattoos. If you mess something up, you can always do a cover up. So I enjoy the freedom that comes from ink. Yeah. So welcome to my space where I write, I draw, I kind of do everything in this room. You can come on in and just kind of look around. But I like the light in here. I feel like light is really important when you're writing, and also, of course, when you're drawing. And I like to be inspired by the things around me. So I have lots of knickknacks and lots of plants and lots of things that I find really inspiring. So yeah, this is where I hang out and where I have fun. So when it comes to a group of poems, I don't always have the intention that they're going to be a collection. In fact, I would say that's really never the intention. I write standalone poems. I think with drawing, sometimes I'll have an idea for a series right off the bat, and I'll know that it's going to be a series. With poems, it kind of works a little bit differently. Most of the time, I am just writing poems, and then once I have a collection of poems, let's say, I have 60 poems, 70 poems, something like this, then I'll kind of go through and find some kind of common theme and carve out a collection out of the work that I have. I will say that I've noticed, right, over periods of time, the things that you write about or the place that you are, emotionally, mentally, whatever, does generally have a theme. So I'll find that for a long period of time, I'll write about, I kind of come back to the same topic in one way or another. And so that sort of makes it easy for a collection to carve itself out. But then there are times where things are just changing in my life or, in me, and I end up with a lot of work that's just very different. So not everything makes it into a collection, and that's perfectly okay. My art has evolved a lot since I moved into the neighborhood, just because I find myself sort of settling in, slowing down, and exploring very different things, emotionally, mentally, and every way. I think because I was moving around for quite a bit before I settled in here, there was like sort of a transient element to my art. And I find that the longer I'm here, the more that I find myself just kind of slowing down and focusing more and more on nature, focusing more and more on plants, and just on on living kind of a slower pace of life, because I think so often we're in such a rush to get to the next thing, to move to the next project. And living here has kind of changed that for me. And so I see that in my work. I definitely see it in my writing. The writing that's emerging is just, it's coming from a different place. And it's exciting to see that evolution. And I'm also just more focused on, on plant care than I ever have been. So that's definitely been making its way into my illustrations, where I've always been largely focused on drawing women and on the female body. I find myself just drawing a lot more plants. So I think that comes with, caring for so many plants. You just become inspired by them. So my history with the neighborhood is really cool. My partner and I we lived in Miami for a very long time. Like 26 years I lived in Miami, and then we left Miami and we moved to Northport, Florida, where we spent the pandemic. We had decided already that we wanted to move to Saint Pete, so we rented a house here. And the very first weekend that we were here, the neighborhood was having the studio tour. So we got here, and all of a sudden everybody's house was open and people were welcoming folks in and showing their art, and everybody's studios were on display. And I had no idea that this happened here. I didn't know that there was an enclave, and I just felt so excited and inspired to be a part of it. And everybody welcomed me in, and it's just been the coolest experience to be a part of this neighborhood and to be so welcomed. I don't think I ever felt as supported as I have here in this neighborhood.